At its core, this is a story of injustice, resilience, and reckoning. It's about how power can be abused under the guise of law, and how truth, no matter how buried, always finds a way to rise. It's a fight not just against corrupt cops, but against a system designed to protect them at the expense of the innocent. And at the heart of it is the unbreakable bond between a brother and sister, and the relentless fire of a woman who refuses to let her brother become another statistic. This story falls under the legal drama/thriller genre, infused with powerful elements of social justice, emotional suspense, and courtroom tension. It delves deep into systemic racism, legal manipulation, and the raw human fight for freedom. The dominant emotion throughout the story is a cocktail of rage, suspense, heartbreak, and triumph. The audience should feel the deep injustice of the arrest, the suffocating weight of a corrupt system, and the rush of vindication when truth finally slices through the lies. The story explores themes such as abuse of power, officers who believe their badge makes them untouchable, systemic racism, a young black man targeted, profiled, and framed because of the color of his skin, family and loyalty, a sister who risks her career, safety, and sanity to free her brother, redemption and courage, the transformation from helplessness to power as hidden truths come to light. The title hints at danger, betrayal, and an unexpected reckoning. It sparks questions. Why was he framed? Who is this sister? What does she uncover that shakes the entire system? By blending legal warfare, emotional stakes, and systemic commentary, this story aims not just to entertain, but to awaken. It's not just about proving innocence. It's about exposing the truth, confronting the monster behind the mask, and burning it all down if that's what it takes to rebuild something just. It happened in seconds. One moment, Malik was walking home from work, earbuds in, hoodie up, lost in his usual rhythm. The next, red and blue lights flared behind him like an explosion. Tires screeched. Doors flung open. Guns were drawn. Hands where I can see them, a voice barked. He froze, confused, terrified. The music still played in his ears, until one of the cops snatched his phone from his hand and slammed him against the cold hood of a squad car. "You fit the description," one officer sneered. He hadn't done anything. No one had explained anything. His mouth opened to protest, but a knee pressed into his spine, shoving his words back down his throat. He was cuffed, searched, shoved into the back seat. The officers didn't talk to him after that. They talked to each other, laughing like this was just another Thursday night. Then came the evidence. A gun, a small bag of powder, found in the alley, close to where they picked him up. Only thing was, he never stepped in the alley. And the cameras on the squad car weren't working. At the precinct, no one listened. No one cared. He was booked, fingerprinted, thrown into a holding cell like so many before him. His eyes searched for reason, for justice, for someone who would hear him. But all he saw were cold walls, tired faces, and a system that moved like a machine, silent, merciless, unyielding. Malik Johnson, the clerk called out, charged with possession with intent to distribute illegal firearm, resisting arrest. His heart dropped. His life flashed in fragments. His job, his apartment, his little niece's birthday next week. All gone. With the flick of a pen, they let him call one person. Just one. He didn't hesitate. He dialed. "Jazz," he whispered into the phone. "They got me." Silence. Then, "What do you mean?" "They said I had a gun." "Drugs." "Jazz." "I swear I didn't." "I'm on my way." She didn't yell. She didn't cry. But Malik knew that voice. The razor edge behind it. Jasmine Johnson, Esquire. The one woman who never backed down. Not from bullies. Not from judges. And definitely not from dirty cops. She hung up. And somewhere deep in the city's rusted bones, something shifted. Because they didn't just arrest the wrong man. They declared war on the wrong sister. Jasmine Johnson stood at the entrance of the courthouse, the weight of the morning's news pressing against her chest like a lead weight. She wasn't new to this game. She was the one who had beaten the odds, time and time again. A woman in a male-dominated profession. A black woman, too. She had fought for justice all her life. But this was different. Her brother was in jail, framed by the very system she'd spent her career battling. She felt it in the pit of her stomach, something far worse than the usual outrage. This was personal. Jasmine had seen her share of cases. Corruption, lies, manipulation. She'd walked into rooms full of men in suits and seen the dismissive glances, the silent judgments. They thought she was just a token, a diversity hire. But they didn't know her. Not the woman who had clawed her way up from the streets, who had watched her family fall apart in the face of systemic racism, who had sworn never to let anyone be silenced by the very system that had silenced them. And now they had her brother. Malik had always been the quiet one, the steady one, the one who believed in people, even when the world hadn't given him much reason to. He was her younger brother, and she'd watched him grow up in a world that had always looked at him as less. She'd shielded him from the worst of it, kept him grounded, kept him out of trouble. She told him that if he just stayed on the right path, everything would be fine. But now he was sitting behind bars, framed for a crime he didn't commit. And Jasmine knew, deep down, that this wasn't just about her brother. This was about a system that targeted people like him, people like them, people who were too often seen as expendable. Her mother had died when she was young, and her father? Well, her father had disappeared before she even learned how to pronounce his name. Jasmine had learned early on that family wasn't just blood. It was the people who fought beside you when the world tried to crush you. Under its heel, she had a few close friends. But Malik was her blood, her heart, the person she'd sworn to protect no matter the cost. She thought about her life, the years she'd spent studying law, the long nights in the library, the frustration of watching cases get thrown out simply because the system didn't care. She was used to fighting a battle that was already rigged. But this was something different. She walked past the security checkpoint with her head held high. The guard didn't even ask for her ID. He knew who she was. Everyone did. She was a force in her own right, a lawyer with an unyielding passion for justice. But right now, she was more than just a lawyer. She was a sister. And that was the role she was going to play today. The courtroom loomed ahead, its cold marble floors reflecting the harsh artificial light. Jasmine's gaze flickered to the prosecutor, an old rival she had beaten in the past. His eyes narrowed as he saw her approach. He knew what was coming. He wasn't going to win this one. Jasmine had always been driven by something deeper than ambition. She'd watched the system destroy people, people who looked like her, people who looked like Malik. And she'd vowed to change that, to rewrite the rules. But even she knew this wasn't going to be easy. It was going to be a fight for everything. And if she lost, she wasn't just fighting for her career. She was fighting for her brother's life. She took a deep breath as she entered the courtroom, her heart steadying with each step. The world was about to find out just how far she was willing to go. And no one was going to stop her. The courtroom was suffocating, the air thick with tension, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath in anticipation. Jasmine stood at the front, her fingers gripping the wooden podium, her eyes locked on the prosecutor, Gregory Hale, a man whose career had always been built on his ability to crush cases like hers. He'd always seen her as a threat, but today he was going to learn what it meant to face a woman who had nothing left to lose. She glanced over at Malik, sitting in the defendant's chair. His expression was blank, as if the weight of what was happening was too much for him to process. He looked like a shadow of the man she knew, the brother who used to laugh with her until their sides hurt, the man who had always believed in people, in fairness. It broke her heart to see him like this. But she couldn't afford to let that break her focus. She couldn't afford to let emotion cloud her judgment. "Your Honor," Hale said, his voice dripping with condescension as he addressed the judge, "we are prepared to present overwhelming evidence that the defendant, Malik Johnson, was found in possession of both illegal narcotics and a firearm, which we believe he was planning to distribute." Jasmine's eyes narrowed. It wasn't just a legal case anymore. This was a battle for her brother's life. Hale's words were cold, clinical, calculated. He spoke as though he was sure of his victory, because he was. The evidence was solid, or at least That's what he believed. The testimonies, the surveillance footage, everything was lined up perfectly to paint Malik as the criminal they wanted him to be. But Jasmine knew better. She couldn't prove it just yet, but she knew something was off. The cameras that supposedly captured the arrest? They were conveniently malfunctioning. The officers involved had conflicting stories, and the so-called evidence that had been found near Malik's location didn't add up. This wasn't about evidence. This wasn't about justice. This was about destroying Malik to protect the dirty secrets they were all hiding. But what Jasmine didn't know, what no one could have predicted, was what would happen next. The door at the back of the courtroom opened with a creak, drawing everyone's attention. Jasmine froze. Her pulse quickened. There, standing in the doorway, was her worst nightmare. Detective Raymond Fuller, the lead officer who had been part of Malik's arrest, entered the courtroom. His usual smirk was absent today, replaced by an odd, unsettling look. He had his hands tucked into his pockets, but his eyes darted nervously from side to side. He wasn't looking at anyone in particular, but he was aware, very aware, that he was being watched. Jasmine's heart hammered in her chest. She knew this man, knew how he worked, how he'd always gotten away with bending the truth and manipulating situations. He was an expert in covering his tracks, and now, here he was, in front of her, standing as though he was just another witness to the supposed crime. But something in his posture caught her attention. The way he fidgeted, the twitch in his jaw. Something wasn't right. Fuller wasn't acting like a man who was confident in his version of events. He wasn't acting like someone who knew he was untouchable. He was nervous. And that, Jasmine thought, was the opening she needed. The judge glanced at Fuller and raised an eyebrow, motioning for him to take a seat in the witness stand. Fuller hesitated for a moment before slowly making his way to the chair, his eyes never leaving Jasmine's. She could feel the weight of his stare, the lingering tension between them like a palpable force. The room fell silent. It was then that Jasmine made her move. She stood, straightening her back, her voice smooth and controlled as she addressed the judge. "Your Honor, before we proceed, I would like to request a brief recess." The judge didn't look up immediately, but the hesitation in his eyes was brief. "A recess?" he asked, his voice skeptical. "Ms. Johnson, we're in the middle of proceedings." "I understand, Your Honor," she replied, her voice steady despite the adrenaline racing through her veins. "But there's a matter of great importance that I believe will directly affect this case. It involves new evidence." The judge frowned, looking over at Hale, who sat with his arms crossed, eyes narrowing. "New evidence." Hale scoffed, but there was a hint of uncertainty in his voice now. "What exactly are you suggesting, Ms. Johnson?" Jasmine locked eyes with the prosecutor for the briefest of moments before turning back to the judge. "I suggest that Detective Fuller may not be telling the full truth," she said, her voice a sharp whisper that carried through the room, leaving an electric silence in its wake. Jasmine could feel every eye on her now. The silence stretched, punctuated by the faintest sounds of gasps from the gallery. Fuller shifted in his seat, and Jasmine could practically feel the weight of his guilt hanging in the air. Before the judge could respond, Jasmine took a step forward, her heels clicking on the marble floor as she turned to face the detective directly. "You see," she continued, her words now cutting through the room with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel, "I've done my research, and I've discovered that Detective Fuller may have a history of tampering with evidence. Of, shall we say, losing things that didn't fit the narrative he wanted to create." Fuller's eyes widened, but he quickly recovered, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "This is outrageous," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper, though the nervousness was evident. "This is a baseless accusation." Jasmine didn't back down. "It's not baseless," she said, her voice growing louder, stronger. "It's the truth. And the truth is about to come out, Detective." The room seemed to hold its breath. The tension crackled like static in the air. Jasmine knew one thing for sure now. The game had changed. And she wasn't backing down. The courthouse buzzed with whispers as Jasmine made her way out of the courtroom, Fuller's eyes still burning into her back. She could feel the shift, the new battle lines being drawn in the sand. What had started as a simple case of wrongful accusation had just exploded into something much larger. She was no longer just defending her brother. She was fighting a system built on lies, corruption, and secrets buried so deep no one dared disturb them. As soon as the door closed behind her, Jasmine let out the breath she'd been holding. She hadn't expected the recess to go in her favor. In fact, she hadn't expected anything to go her way today. But that moment, just a few seconds of truth slipping through the cracks, had been enough to put them all on notice. She was a force they hadn't anticipated. Malik wasn't the only one who needed saving. Jasmine had just made herself a target. She walked briskly down the hall, heading for the nearest exit. She didn't have time to rest. She needed to move fast, to build on this unexpected victory before the system buried it beneath layers of bureaucracy and lies. She had to make sure that what had just happened wasn't brushed aside as a mere distraction. Her phone buzzed in her hand, the sudden noise pulling her from her thoughts. It was a text from her best friend and confidant, Ryan. "You good? I heard what happened. Need backup?" Jasmine's fingers hovered over the screen before she typed back, her words quick but firm. "We've got work to do. I'm going after Fuller. Get me everything you can on him. Everything." She hit send and slipped her phone back into her pocket. Ryan was the only person she trusted to dig deep enough to pull out the kind of dirt she needed. He wasn't just a tech guy, he was a hacker, a man who had never met a firewall he couldn't breach. If there was anything about Fuller she needed to know, Ryan would find it. But even with that ally on her side, Jasmine knew she was walking a tightrope. The deeper she went into this, the more dangerous it became. Fuller wasn't just a cop with a badge. He was a part of something much larger, a network of corruption that extended beyond the police force and into the very veins of the city. She stepped into the elevator, her mind racing. She could feel the weight of the upcoming battle pressing on her chest. She knew the risks. She knew the stakes. And yet, she couldn't back down. Not now. Not when she was this close to uncovering the truth. The elevator doors slid shut with a soft chime, and she leaned against the cool metal, closing her eyes for a brief moment. The sound of the city outside, the honking horns, the chatter, the distant sirens, was a constant reminder of the world she was up against. But it was also a reminder of why she had to keep pushing. For Malik. For the people who didn't have the luxury of fighting back. The elevator stopped on the ground floor, and Jasmine stepped out into the bustling lobby of the courthouse. She barely registered the people around her, her mind still focused on what lay ahead. She had a plan, but plans had a way of falling apart when they came face to face with reality. She was so absorbed in her thoughts that she almost missed the figure standing by the front doors. It was a man, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in a sharp suit. His posture was stiff, almost too formal, and his eyes followed Jasmine as she approached. She recognized him immediately. "Mr. Hale," she said, her voice cool. The last time she had seen Gregory Hale, the prosecutor had been smug, confident in his ability to win this case. He hadn't expected her to throw a wrench in his carefully crafted machine. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Ms. Johnson," he said, his voice too smooth. "Impressive move in there today. A recess request. You've got some nerve." Jasmine didn't flinch. "You shouldn't be so quick to underestimate me, Mr. Hale." He chuckled, but there was an edge to it. "I don't underestimate anyone, Ms. Johnson. I simply know how this game is played. You can try all you want to disrupt the case, but in the end, your brother's guilt is undeniable." Jasmine took a step closer, her voice barely a whisper. "And yet, you can't explain the missing surveillance footage, can you?" His smile faltered for just a second, an imperceptible slip that only someone paying close attention would catch. Jasmine saw it, and it was enough to fuel her determination. "I don't know what you're talking about," Hale replied, his voice too tight. "I think you do," she said, her tone steady. "And I think you're going to be very interested in what comes next." Without waiting for his response, she turned on her heel and walked toward the exit. Hale's eyes followed her, but this time there was no arrogance, no confidence. only a flicker of something darker, something she couldn't quite place. The journey had just begun, and Jasmine was prepared to follow it wherever it led. As she stepped outside into the city's chaotic pulse, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was Ryan's message. "I've got something. Meet me at the cafe on 5th. It's time to dig deeper." Jasmine didn't hesitate. She had a feeling that whatever Ryan had found would be the missing piece of the puzzle. But as she walked briskly through the crowded streets, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up, and she instinctively glanced around. Was it just paranoia, or was someone following her? She quickened her pace, the adrenaline kicking in, her instincts sharp. She couldn't afford to let her guard down. Not now. Not when the game was just getting started. The cafe on 5th was a small, inconspicuous spot, tucked between two rundown buildings, with its faded sign barely visible from the street. Jasmine pushed the door open, the soft chime of the bell overhead barely catching her attention. She was too focused on what lay ahead, what Ryan had found. Her eyes quickly scanned the room until they landed on him, sitting at a corner booth, his laptop open in front of him. Ryan was all business today, his usual joking demeanor replaced by a tense concentration. The man had a knack for diving into dark corners of the digital world, and Jasmine was about to find out just how deep those corners went. "Any luck?" Jasmine asked, slipping into the seat across from him without hesitation. She didn't waste time with pleasantries anymore. She had no room for small talk. Ryan didn't immediately respond. His fingers clicked rapidly over the keyboard, his eyes never leaving the screen as the data he'd pulled up scrolled in front of him. "I might have found something big," Ryan said, his voice low. His tone was different than usual. There was a trace of caution in it, like he wasn't sure whether to share what he had uncovered. Jasmine's eyes narrowed. She leaned forward, her curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" Ryan paused, his fingers hovering over the keys for a moment before he finally spoke. "Fuller. He's not just dirty, Jasmine. He's entangled in something much bigger. This goes beyond simple corruption." Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. She had suspected something like this. She had known from the moment she'd seen Fuller enter the courtroom that there was more to him than met the eye. But hearing it confirmed, the magnitude of what Ryan was saying hit her like a punch to the gut. "What do you mean? What are you talking about?" she pressed, her voice tense. Ryan exhaled slowly, his fingers continuing to dance over the keyboard, pulling up a series of encrypted files that he had decrypted in a matter of minutes. His eyes were glued to the screen as he spoke, revealing information that had the potential to tear apart everything Jasmine thought she knew. "It's a network," Ryan said, his voice thick with disbelief. "Fuller's been working with a group, a shadow organization that's been pulling the strings behind a series of high-profile cases in the city. But here's the kicker. Jasmine, they're not just controlling the outcomes of criminal cases. They're laundering money, manufacturing evidence, influencing political decisions. They're deep." Jasmine's breath caught in her throat. It was more than she had ever imagined. This was no longer just about her brother. This was about exposing an entire operation that had been orchestrating injustice at the highest levels. "How deep?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ryan slid his laptop across the table, revealing a series of names and locations that Jasmine could barely make sense of. But one thing was clear. Fuller was just a small cog in a much larger, much more dangerous machine. "This," Ryan said, tapping a specific file, "is the key. It's a document detailing secret transactions, bribes, and confidential information that they've been handling for years. And among the names listed, I found a very familiar one." Jasmine's pulse quickened. "Who?" Ryan paused, the tension between them thickening. "It's your father." Jasmine's mind froze. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her father? But her father was dead. He had died when she was a child, leaving a massive hole in her life, a hole that had never quite been filled. The man who had raised her wasn't a saint, but he had never been part of something like this. Could he have been? The thought didn't seem possible. "My father," she repeated, her voice shaky. "That's impossible. My father died when I was a kid." He couldn't have been involved in this. Ryan nodded, but his face was grim. I know. But the documents don't lie, Jasmine. Your father's name is on the list. There are transactions that date back to the late 90s. He was involved in some kind of deal, one that links him to Fuller's organization. The air seemed to thicken around her. Her father, a man who had always been nothing more than a shadow in her memory, was now a central figure in this web of lies and corruption. Jasmine couldn't wrap her mind around it. How had this happened? Had her father been involved in something criminal? Or had someone used his name to further their own agenda? As the weight of the revelation sank in, Jasmine's world seemed to tilt. Everything she thought she knew about her family, about the world she was fighting for, was slipping through her fingers. The ground beneath her felt unsteady, like the foundation of her entire life had been built on lies. She was no longer just defending her brother. She was questioning everything, the truth, her past, and the very system she had trusted for so long. Ryan could see the shock in her eyes, and he leaned in, his voice softer now. I know this is a lot to process, but we need to think about next steps. If your father really was involved, then this isn't just about clearing Malik's name anymore. This is about taking down an entire network. You're going to have to confront Fuller and whoever else is behind this. But you need to be ready. This is bigger than anything you've faced before. Jasmine sat back in her chair, the room spinning around her as she processed the information. She wanted to argue, to deny it, but deep down, she knew Ryan was right. The evidence was in front of her. The truth was unraveling, and it was far darker than she could have ever imagined. A sudden rush of anger surged through her veins. She wasn't just going to stand by and let this happen. She couldn't let her brother pay the price for a crime he didn't commit. And she couldn't let this network of corruption continue to destroy innocent lives. Let's do it, Jasmine said, her voice hardening with resolve. We go after Fuller. We expose him. And we bring this whole damn thing down. Ryan nodded, his eyes filled with a mix of fear and respect. You sure about this? Once we go down this road, there's no turning back. Jasmine looked him in the eye, her determination unwavering. I've already crossed that line, Ryan. I'm not turning back now. And with that, Jasmine knew that the game had truly changed. The stakes had just become personal, and she was ready to fight with everything she had. The decision loomed before Jasmine like an unyielding wall, one that she could neither climb nor break down. No matter how much she wished to, no matter how much she tried to resist, the choice had to be made. And it was one that would define everything. Her brother's future, her own fate, and the fragile thread of justice that she was desperately clinging to. The evidence was right there. Ryan had found it. The names, the transactions, the tangled web of corruption that stretched far beyond Fuller, beyond the police force, even beyond the city itself. She had all the pieces now, and yet there was a price to pay. It wasn't just about exposing Fuller anymore. It wasn't even about clearing Malik's name. That was the easy part. The real battle lay ahead, and it would require Jasmine to decide just how much she was willing to sacrifice. As she sat in the dimly lit room, the weight of the decision pressing down on her, she realized just how far things had come. There was no going back now. The documents Ryan had uncovered weren't just the tip of the iceberg. They were the very foundation of a massive criminal empire that stretched deep into the political and corporate elite. What started as an act of defiance against a corrupt police officer had turned into a full-blown war against a machine that operated in the shadows. The dilemma was clear. If Jasmine revealed the truth, if she exposed the network of corruption that she now knew existed, there would be no turning back. She would be up against a system so powerful, so entrenched, that even the most powerful forces in the world wouldn't be able to stop it. She would be marked for death, her every move watched, her every step a potential trap. But if she stayed silent, if she buried the truth and let this go on, the world would remain blind to the injustice her brother had faced and the countless others who had been wronged. It would mean that the corruption would continue unchecked, destroying more lives in its wake. It would mean abandoning the very cause that had led her here. Jasmine's mind raced, the weight of the choice closing in around her like a vice. The stakes had never been higher. The city, her family, and even her very soul were hanging in the balance. And, as much as she hated to admit it, she knew that there would be consequences no matter which path she took. Her phone buzzed on the table, pulling her from her thoughts. She picked it up, reading the name that flashed on the screen. Ryan. It wasn't like him to text when they were deep in the middle of planning, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Jazz, they know. They're coming for you. You have to choose, now. Fight or walk away. You can't have both. The words were simple, but they hit her like a freight train. They know. It was the final confirmation she needed. They were already on to her, already aware of what she was planning. The powers behind Fuller's network had eyes everywhere, and Jasmine had walked right into their trap. She didn't need to ask who they were. It was the group Ryan had warned her about, the ones pulling Fuller's strings, the ones who had their fingers in everything. She tossed her phone onto the table, her hands shaking. This was it, the moment she'd feared. The line between fight and flight had just been drawn. The door to the small room creaked open, and Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. She didn't have to turn around to know who it was. The smell of expensive cologne filled the air, and a pair of polished shoes appeared in her peripheral vision. She turned to face him. "Mr. Hale," she said, her voice steady despite the panic surging inside her. "I'm surprised to see you here." He smiled, a cold, empty smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I knew you'd figure it out sooner or later, Jasmine. You've always been too smart for your own good." He took a step closer, his presence filling the room like a heavy shadow. "But here's the thing. You're not just fighting a corrupt cop or a group of criminals. You're fighting against a system that's bigger than you, bigger than your brother, and bigger than any of us." Jasmine stood, her back straightening, her eyes not leaving his. "I'm not afraid of you, Hale." He chuckled, a low, dangerous sound. "Oh, I know you're not afraid. But you should be. Because the choice you have to make right now, it's one you'll regret forever, no matter which way you go." Jasmine clenched her fists at her sides. "What are you asking me to do?" Hale's smile grew wider, more smug. "I'm asking you to think. Think about what happens if you expose us. You'll ruin lives. Yours. Your brother's. Ryan's. You'll be hunted, destroyed. You'll have no peace, no safety. You'll be an enemy to everyone. So why not walk away? Walk away, and I'll make sure your brother goes free. No more charges. No more threats. No more prison." Jasmine's mind reeled. She had already lost so much, her father, the life she thought she knew, and now Hale was offering her a way out. He was offering her a choice to keep her family safe, to let her brother go free. But at what cost? "Do you think I'll sell my soul for my brother's freedom?" she asked, her voice cold, cutting through the tension. Hale's smile faltered, and for the first time, a flicker of something almost human appeared in his eyes. "It's not about selling your soul, Jasmine. It's about survival." Jasmine's heart pounded in her chest. The weight of her decision was unbearable. She could end this now, walk away, and spare everyone the pain of what was coming. But she knew in her gut that it would never be enough. Walking away meant leaving the system intact, leaving the corruption to continue unchecked. And that was something Jasmine could never allow. "I'm not backing down," she said, her voice firm. "You want me to choose between my family and what's right, but there's no choice to make. I'm taking you down. All of you." Hale's smile disappeared completely, replaced by a look of pure contempt. "You're making a mistake, Jasmine. But I suppose it was never about making the right choice, was it? It was always about your pride." And with that, he turned, walking out of the room, leaving Jasmine standing there, her heart pounding in her chest. The decision had been made. The fight was on. But as the door clicked shut behind him, a dark, chilling thought gnawed at her. What if she was wrong? Jasmine stood alone in the middle of the room, the silence pressing in around her. Hale's words echoed in her mind like the last breath of a dying man, each one sinking deeper into her bones. But she wasn't listening anymore. She had already made her decision, and there was no turning back. The next few hours were a blur. Jasmine could feel the storm brewing. The pieces were in motion, the trap was set, and now all that remained was the confrontation. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Ryan. "Jazz, they're moving fast. You need to get to the courthouse. Now." She didn't waste time responding. She grabbed her jacket and rushed out of the room, the adrenaline kicking in as she sprinted toward the elevator. Every step felt heavier than the last, like the weight of the world was closing in on her. She was on the edge now, and the final showdown was coming. The clock was ticking, and she couldn't afford to waste a second. When the elevator doors opened, she found herself standing face to face with two men in dark suits. They didn't speak, didn't need to. They were there for her. Jasmine took a deep breath. The courthouse was just a few blocks away, but in this moment it felt like a lifetime. She fought to control her breathing, but her pulse was racing. She was prepared for this. She had to be. Everything she'd done, every move she'd made, had led to this point. She'd uncovered the truth, exposed the corruption, and now she was going to confront the men who had pulled the strings from the shadows. As she stepped out of the building, she caught a glimpse of the city's skyline. It looked beautiful, almost serene, under the orange glow of the setting sun. But Jasmine knew that underneath the quiet facade of the city, something dark was festering, and she was going to tear it down. She arrived at the courthouse with a sense of finality. The massive building loomed ahead, its columns reaching up to the sky like ancient sentinels guarding the gates to justice. But Jasmine wasn't fooled. She knew the truth now. The justice she had spent her life fighting for was a lie. Inside the courthouse, the atmosphere was tense. People moved hurriedly, whispers circulating about the case that had captivated the city. But Jasmine had no time for whispers. She was heading straight for the heart of it all. She made her way down the hallway, her footsteps echoing in the marble corridor, when a familiar figure appeared at the far end. Fuller. His gaze met hers, and for a brief moment, the world seemed to stop. He was standing there, wearing his usual smug expression, but there was something different in his eyes. Something darker. "You shouldn't have come," Fuller said, his voice low and dangerous. "You've crossed the line, Jasmine. And now, there's no going back." Jasmine didn't flinch. She had heard it all before. "It's over, Fuller. You and your people, you're done." Fuller chuckled, shaking his head slowly. "You think it's that simple? You think you can just waltz in here and expose us? You have no idea what you're up against." "I know exactly what I'm up against," Jasmine replied, stepping closer. "I know what you've done, and I know who's behind it all. You can't hide anymore." For a moment, Fuller didn't respond. His eyes flickered briefly to the hallway behind her, where Jasmine could hear the sound of hurried footsteps approaching. They were coming. "I told you, Jasmine," Fuller said, his voice colder now. "You're not in control here. You never were." Before she could respond, the door to the courtroom burst open, and a group of men in black suits stormed in, surrounding her. They were the enforcers, Fuller's personal muscle, and they weren't here for a conversation. They were here to make sure she never spoke again. Jasmine's heart raced, but she refused to back down. The truth was out now. It was too late for them to silence her. As the men closed in, one of them pulled a gun from beneath his coat, pointing it directly at Jasmine's chest. The cold metal gleamed under the harsh courthouse lights. Her mind raced, calculating her options. But there was only one way out. She had to fight. "Drop the gun," a voice commanded from behind her. Jasmine froze. It was Ryan. Ryan, who had been with her through every step of this journey, who had hacked into the system, who had fought beside her, was standing in the doorway, his own gun drawn. He was the backup she hadn't known she needed, the one who had been silently working from the shadows to help her. "Ryan, don't," Jasmine said quickly, her voice urgent. "Get out of here. It's too dangerous." But Ryan didn't move. His eyes never left the men in front of them, his stance steady and determined. "No," Ryan said. "I'm not leaving you. We end this now." The room was tense with the potential for violence, the weight of the moment pressing down on them. Jasmine's heart pounded in her chest, but she didn't move, didn't back down. She knew this was the moment that would determine everything. This was the final confrontation, the culmination of everything she had fought for. Fuller's smirk faltered as he glanced at the gun in Ryan's hand. For a brief moment, there was hesitation in his eyes. He knew the game had changed. He had underestimated them. In that split second of uncertainty, Jasmine took a step forward, her voice fierce, commanding. "Enough, Fuller. It's over." A silence fell over the room. For the first time in years, Jasmine felt the weight of justice on her side. The truth was undeniable, and there was no way for Fuller to escape. Jasmine didn't flinch as the men around them tightened their grip, but the tension was palpable. The standoff seemed to stretch on forever, but it was clear now. The truth would come out. And whatever happened next, whatever the consequences would be, she had won. Suddenly, the doors to the courtroom burst open again. This time it was the police, real police, the ones who weren't on Fuller's payroll. They had arrived, and it was the final nail in the coffin. They were here to arrest Fuller and his men. "You're finished," Ryan said, his voice cold. Fuller's face twisted with rage. "This isn't over. You'll never get away with this." But it was too late. The enforcers were already being handcuffed, the chaos unfolding like a dark tide, pulling everyone under. Jasmine felt her heart race as she watched Fuller being dragged away. She couldn't believe it was happening. After everything, after all the fear, all the pain, it was over. The battle was won. Justice had prevailed. But even as the police swarmed the courthouse and Fuller was taken away, Jasmine knew that the fight was far from over. This victory was only the beginning. As she looked at Ryan, standing beside her, their eyes met. No words were needed. They had done it. They had won. But the war was far from over. The fight for justice would continue. And Jasmine would be at the front lines, ready to face whatever came next.